Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has traveled to Turkey to meet with President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan in a bid to revive peace efforts. Istanbul has already hosted 3 rounds of talks between the two countries, and now Erdogan is urging Ukraine and Russia to return to the negotiating table. Wednesday's meeting took place as word emerged that Washington was discussing possible conditions for peace with Moscow. Zelenskyy said he hoped to resume prisoner swaps with Russia by the end of the year. Sinan Ciddi is director of the Turkey program at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Good to have you with us.
Hi, good to be with you.
Erdogan called for Ukraine and Russia to return to talks in Istanbul. So what is driving Erdogan to step back into the center of diplomacy now? And what could Turkey actually gain from this?
In a word, it's prestige for Erdogan. He would like to be in the limelight of positioning Turkey as the solution to the Ukraine conflict. He is the arbiter, or he would like to position Turkey as the arbiter, the ultimate threadbearer to see the conflict end, the war end in Ukraine, and he has been positioning Turkey or Ankara in front of the United States and in front of NATO, saying, look, I have the ability to communicate both with Moscow as well as Kyiv as the central interlocutor to be able to resolve this conflict. And because he claims to have a meaningful relationship with both parties that can end this conflict. Whether he does or not is to be determined, but he certainly does have the sort of voice that he likes to project. And when he does, both sides and the transatlantic partners listen.
Well, what is your assessment of his claims of neutrality? Because it is interesting here. Turkey is one of the largest members of NATO, which Putin has said the expansion of NATO was one of the reasons why he invaded Ukraine to begin with. So how does Turkey manage to position itself in between NATO and Russia to start these negotiations?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think Turkey has a very complicated relationship inside of NATO. Turkey is, in reality, it is a hedger. Erdogan and his government have said repeatedly in conversations and when they sort of typify the West, saying that both Europe and the United States are in decline and that Turkey should not have all of its eggs in one basket, as in they're not betting entirely on NATO and Europe as their sort of traditional allies in front of Russia. And therefore, Turkey has built up this relationship with Russia over time. And in the Ukraine theater, what we have seen is Turkey has both constrained Russia's military action inside of Ukraine by closing off the Turkish straits that has blocked Russian shipping. But on the other hand, it has also proven to be selling and enabling Russia's war effort, especially earlier on, when Turkish facilitated Russian illicit financing, but also sold dual-use goods that ended up in the Russian military, in effect aiding Russia's war effort. So Turkey was essentially seen to be playing both sides.
And what is Turkey aiming to deliver in terms of negotiations? Are we talking about humanitarian corridors and prisoner swaps, or is Erdogan really shooting for the idea of being able to negotiate a full ceasefire here?
I think this is unclear at this point. What he has intimated in the past is basically to position himself in front of the Trump administration since January 2025, when Trump came to power for the second time, and said, look, I am a pivotal country as far as Washington is concerned, because based on his relationship with both Moscow and Kyiv, that he has this ability to speak to both sides. And Trump essentially, or Washington, wants to really see this war ended, because it was a key campaign promise of Trump when he said he could resolve this conflict on day one when he came to office. And Erdogan basically has been saying to Trump, look, I can help deliver this for you. And what he's meant by and how he's been able to deliver that for Trump is unclear. He has volunteered Turkish peacekeepers after a ceasefire has been signed. How that's going to happen is always been unclear. But he's basically trying to position Turkey as a problem solver for Washington. But in return for that, as part of a wider deal with Washington, Turkey has been seeking to essentially purchase high-end weapons from the United States in return for basically solving problems for Washington. And so far, Ankara has not been able to manage any of that.
And we've seen reports that there's a peace plan potentially being drafted by U.S. and Russian officials. Is Erdogan being cut out of this then?
It's not altogether clear if he's actually been included. We haven't seen any formal statements to suggest that Turkey's actually been included. We've seen Turkey's foreign minister, other Turkish officials, and Erdogan essentially say that he would like to be included, and that without Turkey that there can be no lasting peace. But again, I've not seen anything to suggest that Turkey is an integral part of any sort of substantive deal that would come through. But Turkey has always been, since the conflict began, and volunteered its services as an interlocutor for peace, a staging ground for negotiations. But none of these has ever resulted in substantive results. But again, Erdogan likes to position himself as a central player, and the Trump administration does like to sort of lean on that to the extent that Erdogan is willing to offer his free services.
Sinan Ciddi from the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Thanks.
Thank you.